and welcome to Taiwan Talk, where we share the stories of people living in Taiwan. I'm Trevor Tortomasi, and joining me in the studio today is Jean-Jacques Chen, otherwise known as JJ, who is a French-Belgian-Taiwanese artist and a longtime veteran of the industry of animation. JJ, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
So first off, can you tell us about some of the projects that you've worked on over the years?
I basically studied animation when I was in Belgium. So after that, I came straight up here in Taiwan for working on some studio jobs. So first off, I started like small. So as a freelance animation director, and I did a few music videos. Afterwards, they invited me to work on pre-production and post-production of a TV series and a feature film. So that was pretty cool.
We can also put a link in the description of the podcast for people to find it if it's somewhere on the internet.
No, unfortunately.
No, it's gone, lost.
It's gone, lost forever.
Okay.
No, there are some stuff, but most of them are very bad quality because it was done in 2008, 2009, before the advent of HD on YouTube. So the quality is pretty janky.
Well, you, JJ, have worked in both Taiwan and Belgium and France a little bit. Uh-huh. So with all this sort of pre-production, production, post-production knowledge of how animation works and is put together, what are the biggest differences you've seen in each of these places that you've worked, maybe in the animation industry?
Well, every place obviously has very different ways of working. In Taiwan, even though I worked for a few years in Taiwan, I don't know that much the industry here because it's very well guarded. Like basically, when I was at the studio I was working at, I very much wanted to connect with a lot of the people in the industry in Taiwan, but my boss at the time guarded me under his wing. Like he really completely shielded me from any other connection because at the time apparently there was quite a lot of poaching going around. So a lot of studios were kind of like poaching other studios' talents. Taiwan has a very interesting story in the animation world, worldwide industry. For a long time, Taiwan was actually a very big helping hand to Disney. Actually, like all the animation from the Disney Renaissance era from the 90s, ever since Little Mermaid to Aladdin, Lion King, Mulan, all the movies of that period, the production was actually done in Taiwan. So obviously, like the pre-production, all the character design, the storyboards, the script, all of these were done in Disney as well to begin with in LA. But most of the animation process and the coloring and the background, all of the stuff has been done in Taiwan. And so Taiwan has been a very big helper of big customers like Disney or even the Japanese studios as well for over 2-3 decades, I think, from the 80s up to the 2000s. And then Toy Story happened. And when Toy Story happened, basically Disney just thought, okay, that's it. That's the future of animation. We're going to get rid of all the 2D hand-drawn animation contents that we've been doing for the past like 60 years. And we're going to solely focus on all the CG animation stuff. So they basically cut ties with almost all their studios worldwide. Like Taiwan was not the only studio that was working with Disney. They had also these studios like all over Europe and all over the US. And all of them just basically shut down one after the other. So the Taiwanese industry was kind of on a tight deadline and they had to kind of like readapt themselves or die, basically. And unfortunately, like Hongkong Studio, they tried to adapt, they tried to make their own feature film. But at the same time, the problem is that they were very good at the craft of production, of animation, but none of them was actually good at directing a movie. They didn't really have the storytelling chops, the being at the seat of the leader rather than just the follower. And because of that, they tried to make a very big movie in Taiwanese standards. It was Hong Hai, 2005. So that movie was basically one of the chapters of The Journey to the West with Sun Wukong. The main character was the son of Niumo Wang. So it's like Hong Hai, the red sun, basically. And that was a movie that was very well animated. Like the art was great. For Taiwanese animation, I feel like it's one of their best. But unfortunately, the movie itself was not really that great. Like the story itself was not that compelling. And it just completely bombed at the box office here, which basically sent the studio like bankrupt. So a lot of the alumni of this studio are now either teaching at Peita, for example, or some of them have recreated some smaller scale studios. So now Taiwan is kind of, they don't really have big studios anymore. They only have like small to medium sized studios, and it's kind of like scattered. So there's a lot of competition, and everybody is kind of like very cordial, very friendly, but at the same time, each one kind of like wants to like draw the blanket to themselves. So it's a little bit hard to really have a unified front if you want to make like a full-on made in Taiwan animation, for example. And more recently, one of the best example of the Taiwanese animation was on Happiness Road. I don't know if you've heard about this movie.
I'm not as familiar, no.
It was an animation movie that was done in 2017 that came out, 2017 or 2016. And it was a long-standing passion project from the director, who's normally a live-action director. And it was her first animation movie. Obviously, there's a lot of things that she didn't really know how to do, but she did surround herself with some really talented young people that really wanted to help her make this story. The main character was actually dubbed by Kuei Mei, which apparently when she read the script, she broke down in tears and said that, okay, this is the kind of story I want to help, and asked the director if she could be the lead actress. So that obviously helps the making of the movie, like the funding process. Right. But in the end, even though the movie was great, I really enjoyed it. I felt like story-wise, this movie was really like one of the best movies that Taiwan has ever done. Sadly, it also bombed at the box office because by that time, Taiwan kind of has this very quirky situation in the animation industry, is that right now it sits in between three giants of animation, like Japan, obviously, which is one of the top two countries in the world in the animation industry, but also South Korea, which is also extremely strong, and also China, which is like on the rise and putting some extremely good content right now. So Taiwan is kind of like the middle kid in between. Because of that, the Taiwanese audience never really have any sort of trust into made in Taiwan animation. Everybody is just so familiar with Japanese animation, obviously, but also now like South Korean and even now more like the Chinese animation. So basically, if your own people in your own country don't support your movie, who will?
What do you think needs to happen for Taiwan to have another big project that does better?
I would say the talent is here. It's not really a problem of Taiwan not having enough talent, because I've been teaching at TNUA for 2 years. So I've seen some of the students there. I know the potential is there. I know that some of them can very easily become like the talents of Taiwan. What is lacking right now is funds, like fundings. Like the government does have some funds for animation projects, but I feel like it kind of like is a drop in the ocean compared to a country like South Korea, for example, or China, which have like much bigger budget and much bigger like fundings. Japan is kind of like a different beast on its own, because they don't really have a lot of fundings. They really operate at a loss, basically. The animators are not paid very well, which is like leading to a lot of burnout there. And Taiwan is kind of like a little bit in the middle of that. Like the fare are probably a little bit better than in Japan, but it's still not much compared to the workload. So it's very much like the industry here is still very much, from what I've heard and what I felt firsthand, it's still very much exploitative. It kind of like works people to death, not just in the animation industry, but I would say animation being a very work-intensive work to begin with, it's making it even worse. So that's
I'd like
one
to
thing.
See some changes in Taiwan's work culture. But.
Yeah, no. But at the same time, I would say definitely fundings, budgetings. Like we need more gutsy
producers?
Like gutsy producers who are not afraid to take a loss.
Okay.
Basically, people who are confident in their talent, confident in the originality and the personality and the message of their directors or of the script writers, and who are confident in taking a risk, basically, to put up more personal stories, more stories that could relate to a lot of people. Basically, a lot of producers right now here, from what I've seen in Taiwan, they all want to have a Pixar level movie, a Disney level movie, but they don't want to give the money to make it. And unfortunately, that's a sad reality of animation. It takes a lot of money. Like it costs. It's a very costly medium to produce. Because it needs so many people to work on it, so many very specialized people, and you have to pay them for like 2 to 5 years. I'm not even mentioning about the computers, the gears, the softwares, which come into account. So yeah, you get easily into the tens, if not hundreds of millions of NT per movie.
And so it does seem like most animated series and films are working more and more efficiently every year,
Mm-hmm.
but how feasible, if at all, is it to animate something alone?
It kind of depends what you want to do. If you want to do a short, for example, it's possible. You'll spend a few months, if not a year, doing it on your own. Everything between 2 minutes to like 10 minutes, I think with the technology today, it's kind of possible to do it on your own. But if you want to do a series or a feature film, that's going to be a lot harder. Like basically, you really need the help of a studio and much bigger budget. Animation in itself is already a very interesting art because it's basically the art that synthesizes all the others. It's you have to be good at drawing, obviously, like drawing art, but also your photography skills must be good because you have to play with the lights. You have to do the mise en scène, like the direct to craft a whole scene. You have to be a good actor because you have to like make your characters believable. Basically, a good animator knows that he's done his job well if the character that he's drawn like thousands of frames of, if nobody is questioning that this character is alive. Like if people are like crying at the delivery, at the performance of the character that he's drawn, and not a single time they feel like it's been well animated, if the animation process go completely into background, then you know that you've done a good job. In animation, we have a lot of different subcategories of division of labors, basically. There's not just animation. You also have like storyboard, for example, that comes in the pre-production. So I'm going to just break it down a little bit. In the process of an animation, you have like three main zones. Categories, of work. The first one is the pre-production, and then you have the production, and then you have the post-production. So the pre-production is at the core of the project. So basically, it's the writing of the script, it's the character design, the background design, the environment design, like the whole world building, basically, and all the colors design as well, like the color palette of the movie. And once you got everything, all of this sorted out, then you do the storyboard. The storyboard basically is putting all the designs that you've got, mixing them with the script, and then you draw basically a sort of a comic book of all the shots of the movie. Like it's the shot list, basically, as the filmmakers would say. So in animation and in filmmaking, storyboards are a pretty big thing. Like a lot of people need them, but there's one main difference between filmmaking live and animation is that in animation, the storyboard is not only big, you have to have a storyboard. If you don't have a storyboard, you have no movie, which is pretty big difference with the live filmmaking, with basically a lot of directors or DP, they basically completely bypass the storyboard. They just want a shot list and that's it. And they talk it out with the DP, the director of photography, and they kind of like sort it out themselves on the spot. Like they can sort it off on the day of the shooting if they want.
They can sort of improvise.
They can improvise, yeah. There's much more improvising rooms for live filmmaking than for animation. So yeah, this is just the pre-production. And once you have all of these, then you can start the production. And the production is all about, once you have your storyboard, then you have to animate all the characters. You have what we call the rough animations. And then you have the cleaning of the animations. So all the framings, you have to actually basically clean them, like ink them, basically.
Yeah.
Then you have the coloring of all the animated frames. You have also all the layout as well. Like the layout is basically the clean version of the storyboard. So it's like the final look of the shot. It's not animated yet, but at the very least, the main key poses, what we call key pose in animation, is all the most important frames of the animation, the most defining ones. And then we kind of link them with what we call the in-between animations.
So when you say like the defining moments of animation, are you talking about like at this exact moment, he needs to be standing on top of a cliff in like a superhero pose?
Exactly.
And then getting to that pose is the linking.
Yeah, and when you have someone who's throwing a punch, for example, you have like 3 to 4 key poses. Like the first key pose is basically the fighting stance. Then you have the anticipation. What we call the anticipation is when the punch is the furthest back. And then you have the actual punch itself that goes completely forward. And then you have the final pose, which is basically like going back to the fighting stance pose. So those are the 4 key poses. And everything that comes between all those framings are called in-betweens. So that's the process of animation in itself. So you have to do all of these rough, and then the cleaning, and then the coloring for every single drawing. This is part of the production. So once this is completed, we get to the post-production, which is basically like you've got the compositing, which is basically putting all the animated characters with all the colors, the ink, the clean lines, and so on. And you put them together with the background. And then you add some lighting effects, some color grading, and some VFX. So basically, the compositing is the visual equivalent of mixing for musical industry. If we kind of like try to talk about like live action filmmaking, it's kind of the equivalent of camera operator, DP, basically. That's why the Japanese call it actually photography instead of compositing. So it's a very fun job. Like I've been doing it for a few years now, and
I've been watching cartoons for 33 years, and I didn't know any of this stuff. So,
it's just to tell you like how many different categories of work go into just making an animation. Like most of the people don't have any idea. How much work and how much time it takes to make an animation. They don't really think too much about it. Like they think, oh yeah, I just watched this animation that lasted like for like 1 hour and a half and stuff like that. It must not be so hard to make it. I'm going to tell you, in average, an animation, be it a movie or a series, it takes 5 years.
5 years for a feature film.
For a feature film or for series.
Okay.
Well, series can be faster than that because they have deadlines to get with television.
Seems like a series would also be much more receptive to like maybe reusing some.
Exactly. Yeah. You can recycle some animations.
And then for the voicing, all the voicing happens when the animation is 100% complete. Or do some studios nowadays, do they change maybe characters' mouths to fit a little more depending on the voicing? Or
okay, so that's a little bit tricky because there's different schools for that. Like the American schools, for example, like Disney, DreamWorks, and all the big studios, they actually like to record all the voice acting before the animation. So basically, they already have either the script, like all the dialogues are already done, and the storyboard. They give the storyboards to the actors, and then the actors have to perform like their voice acting for the whole movie, basically. But they don't really have much image to really like base themselves on. Like they really have to use their imagination. And once they perform this, afterwards the animators actually kind of base themselves from the voice to perform themselves like with the animation. So an animator is actually, it's an actor. You must be an actor to be an animator, actually. You must have good acting skills. Maybe not necessarily facial acting, but at the very least in your mind, you have to know exactly how your character is going to move, depending on the voice, and what type of movement, what type of design kind of like fits that voice, fits the tone of that voice.
And the directing, when knowing when to cut or how many frames to make a pose, because you can't just have an animation go on too long, right? You have to know when to like stop each animation or stop each picture and go to the next picture too. Yeah. That actually comes from the storyboard. So the American way and also now the European way of animation, they actually like to have all the voices prior to the animation, because then they can already kind of make a rough cut of the voice acting. So we have the timing down. That doesn't change anymore. And then you can basically take the storyboard, slap it on the voice, on the editing of the voice, and then you have what we call an animatic. So it's basically an animated storyboard. And then you have, like, the advantage of this is that you have all the timing down. Basically, the editing of a movie, of a live action movie, it happens once everything is shot. It happens really like at the back end of the post-production. In animation, it almost happens at the pre-production. So it happens really like at the time where you have all your voice down, you have your storyboard, and you make basically the editing of the movie at the animatic. You want to know exactly which boxes to fill. Well, you can film for an hour and just cut it into like the most useful 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But with animation, you don't have time to animate any more than exactly how much you're going to use.
Exactly. Because in animation, both in animation and in live filmmaking, the frame rate is usually 24 frames per second. And in animation, basically, most of the time, we kind of double the frame rate, so that makes it like 12 frames per second, because we have double image in each like second, so that 24 frames per second, we basically divide it by 2, so that we kind of divide the workload by half, which is quite a big deal. And that's why when you watch a 2D animation, hand-drawn animation, most of the time, it feels a little bit like choppy. We don't really pay attention to it because we've been so used to it. But most of the time, if you really pay attention to it, like a movie that illustrates this very beautifully is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was a really interesting movie because it was done CG, but it tried to emulate the 2D look. And not just about the look, but also even at the frame rates. Like most of the time, if you watch a Pixar movie or a DreamWorks movie, they work in 24 frames per second, like a live action movie, because the computer can kind of like generate the in-betweens, so you can have very smooth action. But in trying to emulate the 2D style of animation, they actually tone down the frame rates back to 12 frames per second. And that time, you kind of feel like it's a little bit choppy, but at the same time, it sells more that illusion that it has been done by hand. But
we still need that illusion today.
Yeah, exactly. And it gives it more illustration book look to it, which was fantastic. But just very quickly, I'm going back to your question about the recording of the voice. So the Japanese school is different. Like they actually want to have all the animation done, and then only they invite the dubbing actors to dub their voice over the animation, which is like it's two completely radically different styles of recording the voice.
Well, if I'm imagining like an animation style, the mouth doesn't seem to be matching every single plosive and labiodental fricative and stuff like that people are pronouncing. So I imagine it must be easier to voice after.
I would say it's really two different schools. There's not really like one that is better than the other. For me personally, I would prefer to have the sound to have the sound prior to the animation, because sound, and by sound I include music, has a rhythm. Image doesn't. Like the image, you can cut it all the way you want. Like you can have the rhythm that you want, but in music it functions by beats. And the thing is, people can watch a movie silently with just the random editing and some erratic rhythm. They won't really feel too janky. But if you put a music and the beat is not there, people will automatically listen, like hear it. Because beat is just such a universal thing, you know? And I kind of feel like the sound has to work a little bit as the time architecture of the animation. Because the animation is so free, it's so random. You can do everything you want. It kind of needs a little bit of structure at first to feel solid afterwards.
Which project or piece of work are you most proud of?
So far, personally, I've done a music video 12, 13 years ago called Asia River. So that one, I can send the link down below.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, post in the podcast description.
So basically, this is a music video that I've done for a friend of mine who's a DJ here, called DJ Code. And back in the day, we actually met each other at a launch that was called China White, I think. And it was really cool because, like, you see my look. Like, I basically look like I'm coming from a Chinese Kung Fu movie. He was looking exactly the same, but with glasses.
Okay.
So the mustache, the beard, the long hair, and
you
the Chinese
had your
clothes.
Like katana-shaped umbrellas.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So basically, when we met each other, it was like we felt like we were in front of a mirror. And one of my purposes is to make a TV series or a feature film with Chinese painting, but animated. So like trying to blend in like the traditional Chinese art with the nowadays technology with animation. And he basically was mixing electronic music, but with Chinese instruments in them. So when we met, we really like felt like we were in front of a mirror from each other, except I was in the visual and he was in the musical department. So basically we just discussed, okay, yeah, we have to do something together. And 3 months later, we've done this music video. And that was probably the work that I'm still to this day, the proudest of what I've done.
That's so awesome, man. Well, then how about if money or time wasn't an issue? It always is.
Oh, yeah,
but
sure.
What would you really like to, what kind of animation project would you really like to put out into the world?
So right now, the thing is, I've been working for a lot of other projects, like other studios and other people's projects. But at the same time, I'm a director myself. That's what I studied for. And apart from this music video that I just mentioned, I'd never really had the opportunity to stretch my legs and flex my muscles into the directing department by myself. So now that I'm kind of like getting aged up and I'm 42 right now.
You're so old.
I'm so old.
I'll be there soon.
I'm so Gen X. And yeah, the thing is, I kind of really want to stop not wasting my time, but giving my time away to other production. I really want to start like doing my own stuff. And over the past decade, I've always wanted Like I've had like at least 5 series brewing in my head. So I've got like 5 different concepts, 5 different stories that I want to make series out of it, or maybe movies if it fits better in the movie format.
And what comes first there? A pilot and then maybe...
Sure, yeah. Obviously, at first, it's I have to write down the scripts because I never really took the time to really like sit down and write them all down. I have the concept, so I've written down already. First the script, then the character design, then the storyboards. And if possible, if I have time, to try to find some producers and some studios who are willing to help me actually produce one of those pilots, and then go to animation festival all over the world, send it there and try to represent it. Like try to find more people who would be interested into producing it or helping sponsor it.
It's a lot of work, but for all the work that is done that people can see right now, what kinds of animated series or films would you most recommend?
Top 2 or 3, there's so much. It's very hard to pin it down. I would limit myself to the stuff that came out recently. I would say Puss in Boots 2, The Last Wish, is fantastic.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the top 5 DreamWorks movies of all time.
Whoa!
Yes, I would go on record and say that one. From Puss in Boots, like of all characters,
of all
characters, a side story, like a side character that was fun in Shrek 2, obviously, but it was just a side character,
Wow.
And they made a whole franchise out of it. The first one was okay, but the second one, man,
Whoa.
It's one of the best. It's definitely one of the absolute best animation movie that came out in 2022.
Okay. Would you like to name another movie to stand against Puss in Boots 2, or do you want to leave that with your recommendation of the day?
I don't know if it's still in theater right now, but I also really enjoyed the first Slam Dunk.
Slam Dunk.
Slam Dunk is a manga from the 90s about basketball. And it was one of the cult manga and anime of that era in the 90s. And right now, there's the author of the manga actually co-directed an animation movie, which is CG, but visually, it looks a lot like the manga. It's very artistic. Like basically, Puss in Boots also has this. Like it's also a CG movie, but that like Spider-Verse, as I mentioned before, it also takes a very big effort into trying to make it look as if it was a children's book, like an illustrated book or painting book. So the texture and the visual arts, the visual directing of these 2 movies are fantastic, absolutely awesome. I'm not a big fan of basketball myself. I never watched NBA matches, but this movie really made me invested into that basketball match.
We're there for the highlight reels, I would say. How about any final thoughts? Just favorite Pixar movie?
Pixar, one of the last that really caught my attention was Turning Red. And it's a shame that it came out only on Disney Plus, because it really is a movie that you can feel it was designed to be enjoyed on an IMAX screen, like on the biggest screen possible. It's not necessarily the best Pixar out there, but I would say that it's the most personal. It's the one that really is targeting like Asian Americans, or Asian Canadians, or Asian from abroad. And to that demographics, which is still quite a big demography all over the world, it really hits a raw nerve. Like it really is a movie that really speaks to all of us, all the struggles of the second-gen Asian migrants family. Not just the cultural shock, but also the generation shock between the parents and the kids can be shown in some very accurate ways into this movie. And it was beautifully said.
I completely agree. That movie blew me away too. Finally, is there anything you'd like to say to the upcoming creative and artistic minds of Taiwan?
I would say I see a lot of very promising talents leaving Taiwan because of lack of opportunities here. And I can completely understand them. Like I'm also sometimes one of them as well, because I did work here for a long time and I got burned out at some point. I stopped completely doing animation because it was way too hard into an industry. Like when you work in the field that you love, but the project that you love, you don't really love them. You got this feeling of so close, yet so far. But at the same time, I also want to stress out that Taiwan is in dire need of talent. We do have the talents here. They're here already. But we also need to support it with better, as I said, producers or sponsors with more long-term vision who are not afraid to take a loss now to get a win later. Like maybe your first movie is going to be a loss, but your director is good. You can grow them into someone who can be a good storyteller afterwards. So we need more producers like this. We need more sponsors like this, more gutsy sponsors who are not afraid of taking some loss to get some big wins afterwards. So I would say for the talents of Taiwan, like try to weather the storm. Like try to stick it out. Even if the environment right now is not the best, try to make still like good art. Try to make as much as you can, bring out the best art and the best animation and the best storytelling that you can with the limited means that we have right now. And at some point, if you keep pushing little by little, step by step, drop by drop, it will break even. Like the animation industry will get to a point where it's actually a really good place to work.
Okay, well, that is a future I look forward to. Thank you for being a part of it, JJ. And thank you for coming into the studio today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to you, the listener. If you'd like to hear more from ICRT, you can listen to full-length episodes of Taiwan Talk wherever you normally find podcasts, and you can help us out if you like it by telling a friend. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Taiwan Talk. Until next time, I'm Trevor Tortomasi on ICRT FM 100. If you'd like to hear more from ICRT, you can check out our other podcasts. We've got Taiwan This Week, a roundup of the news in Taiwan every Friday, English in the News for useful English expressions explained in Chinese, and EZ News, spelled with the letters E and Z, for simplified daily news. For some lighter news in both English and Chinese, check out News Bites and News for Kids. And if you enjoy them, tell a friend. Thanks for listening.